So in this video, we're going to be learning about matrices in computing. So matrices are the backbone of linear algebra used to solve systems of equations, transformations, and more. And they also have a wide range of applications as they are used in graphics rendering, physics simulations, machine learning, and more. So they can also handle large amounts of data. So they allow structured data handling and efficient processing of large-scale problems. Now, GPUs and parallel processing. Now, what is a GPU? A GPU stands for Graphics Processing Unit and is a specialized hardware designed for faster computations. So this is what a GPU looks like. So GPUs can perform billions of calculations per second. So what is the importance of matrices when it comes to GPUs? So matrices allow GPUs to perform parallel computations on large datasets like image rendering, neural networks, and physics simulations. So now we're going to do matrix multiplication. So matrix multiplication is the fundamental operations when it comes to graphics, AI, and physics. So GPUs excel at performing matrix multiplication efficiently because of their parallel processing power. So an example of matrix multiplication. So transforming 3D coordinates in a game or visual scene require matrix multiplication to apply rotations, translations, and scaling. So matrix multiplications is very useful when it comes to 3D gaming such as GTA, Call of Duty, Fortnite, and all of those other games. So in this video, we're going to be adding two matrices together. So what we're going to do here, we're going to start off by making a function that adds two matrices together. So we're going to start off by writing void, and then we're going to give our function a name. So we can call this function add matrix, and then we want this function to take in the number of rows. So we're going to have int rows, and then we want it to take in the number of columns, so int cols, and then we want it to take in a matrix, an integer array, which is the matrix now. So we're going to have let's call it matrix 1, and then we're going to have two square brackets. The first square bracket is going to be rows, and then the second square bracket is going to be columns. And then we're going to have the second matrix. So we're going to have an integer array, matrix 2. First square brackets, rows, and then the second square bracket is going to be columns. And then we're going to have the result matrix, int, and then let's call this the result. And then we're going to have the first square bracket going to be rows, second one's going to be cols, and then we're going to go inside the function now. So inside the function, we're going to loop through each row of the matrix. So I'm going to write a comment right here. So I'm going to say loop. So I want to say loop through each row of the matrix. So to loop through each row of the matrix, I'm going to use a for loop. So I'm going to say for, and then I'm going to say int I. So I'm going to say I is equal to 0, and then I'm going to say as long as I is less than the number of rows, and then I'm going to increment I. So increment I. Then I'm going to have my curly braces. So inside the for loop, I'm going to loop through each column of the matrix. So I'm going to write a comment right here, and I'm going to say loop through each column. So I'm going to say col of the matrix. And then to loop through each column of the matrix, I'm going to use a for loop. So inside the for loop, I'm going to say int, and then I'm going to use j now because I've already used I for the number of rows. So I'm going to initialize j to 0, and then I'm going to say as long as j is less than calls, the number of calls, and then I'm going to increment j. And then after that, I'm going to add the matrices. So I'm going to add the matrices and store them into the result matrix. So let me just do this right here. So I'm going to store the result. So what I'm going to do right here, I'm going to write result, and then I'm going to have 2 square brackets for I, which is for the rows, and then I'm going to have the second square bracket for j, which is the columns. And then I'm going to say this is equal to matrix 1, and then I'm going to have 2 square brackets. First one is I, second one is j, and then I'm going to add this matrix to matrix 2. So I'm going to have matrix 2, first square bracket I, second square bracket j, and then I'm going to have my semicolon at the end, and I'm done for this function. So now we're going to move to the next function. So the next function basically just prints the matrix to the screen. So let's do it. So we're going to start out by writing void, and then we can call this a function, whatever you want to call it, but I'll just call it result. So this will be the result matrix, and then we want this function to take in the number of rows. So we're going to have int rows, and then we're going to have int calls, and then we're going to have an integer array of the result matrix, but I cannot use that result again, so I have to use something else. So let's call this matrix, and then we're going to have 2 square brackets. The first one is rows, and then the second one is going to be calls. And then I'm going to go inside my function. So inside my function, I'm going to loop through each row of the matrix just like before. So I'm going to copy this and then paste it right here. So to do that, I'm going to use the same for loop. So I'm going to say for, and then I'm going to use int I is equal to 0, and then I'm going to have, as long as I is less than the number of rows, and then I'm going to increment I, and then I'm going to have my curly braces, and then now I'm going to loop through each column of the matrix. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I'm going to paste it right here. And then to loop through every column of the matrix, so I'm going to say for, which is the same for loop as the one above. So I'm going to say int, and then I'm going to say j is equal to 0, and then I'm going to say as long as j is less than the number of calls, and then I'm going to increment j, and then I'm going to have my curly braces. So inside my curly braces, what I have to do now is to print the matrix. So to print the matrix, I have to write the printf function, and then I'm going to have %d. So before %d, I can put something like this, and then I can say %d now, %d, leave a space, and then I can put something like that. And then when I go outside, and then I'm going to say this is matrix, and then I'm going to have 2 square brackets. The first one is I, the second one is J, and then I'm going to have my semicolon. So outside this for loop, I'm going to say printf, and then I'm going to say \n. So this is for after printing the first row, we're going to move to the second line to print the second row. And we are done for this function. So now that we are done with this function, what we have to do now is to go into the main function. So inside the main function, so we're going to start off by writing the main function, and then we're going to have something like this, and then we're going to define the number of rows and columns for each matrix. So what we're going to do, we're going to say int, we're going to say rows, and then you can choose any number of rows that you want. So for this example, I'll just choose 2, and then I'm going to have columns, and then I'll also choose 2 for this one. You can choose any number, but for this example, I'll just use a 2 by 2 matrix. So now I'm going to define 2 by 2 matrices with initial values within them. So I'm going to have an int matrix 1. So in matrix 1, I'm going to have 2 square brackets, and then the number of rows is 2, and then the second square bracket is for the number of columns, which is also 2, and then I'm going to say this is equal to, and then I'm going to have the curly braces. So inside this curly braces, I'm going to have another curly braces, and then I'm going to have digits. So I can put any digits I want here. So I'm going to say 2. The first one is 2, and then I'm going to put a comma, and then let's say 3, and then I'm going to go outside that curly brace, and then I put a comma, and then I put another curly brace over there, and then I'll put 1, and then I'll put let's say 2. So let me explain this quickly. So I initialize the number of rows here to be 2 and the number of columns to be 2. So when you look inside these curly braces right here, I have the first curly brace inside the outer curly brace. So this curly brace is right here. It represents row 1. So this in this row, I have 2 columns, which is 2 and 3. So this first curly brace is row 1, and then the second curly brace with all the numbers in it is row 2. So the first curly brace has 2 columns. So we have column 1, which is 2, and then we have column 2, which is the value 3, and then we move on to the next curly brace. This next curly brace is row 2, which has 2 columns. So 2 columns, we're going to have 1, and then we're going to have 2 as the second column, and then we're going to do this for the next matrix. So we're going to have matrix 2, and then we're going to have 2 rows, and then we're going to have 2 columns, and then we're going to say this is equal to curly braces, and then we're going to have the first curly brace, and then for the first curly brace, which is row 1, we're going to have column 1. In column 1 we have the number 1, and then column 2 we have the number 3, and then we can move on to row 2 now. So in row 2, column 1, let's say we have the value 2, and then row 2, column 2, let's say we have the value 3, and just like that. And then when you're done, go outside, put a semicolon, and then when you're done with that, we're going to declare a result matrix to store the addition result. So we're going to say int, and then we're going to say result. So the result matrix, we're going to have 2 rows, and then we're going to have 2 columns, and then we're going to say this. We don't have to say this is equal to anything, we just have to declare it just like that. And then after that, we have to perform what is known as function call. So we want to call a function that will add those 2 matrices. So what is the name of the function that adds 2 matrices? We called it add matrix. So we're going to write that name right here, add matrix, which is this name right here. And then we're going to pass arguments to that function. So we're going to say rows, we're going to have rows, and then we're going to have calls, and then we're going to have matrix 1, and then we're going to have matrix 2, and then we're going to have the result matrix, and then put your semicolon. So this already adds up the matrices. So what we need to do now is to print the matrix to the screen. So to print the matrix to the screen, you can say printf, and then you can say anything, something like this, result after matrix addition. And then you can have something like this. We can put \n, and then we're going to have semicolon, and then after that we're going to perform another function call for printing the matrix. So we're going to call a function that prints the matrix. So that function, we call it result. So we're going to say result, and then I'm going to say let's see, I'm going to pass argument to that function. So to pass arguments to that function, I'm going to say rows, and then I'm going to say calls, and then I'm going to say the result. And after calling the function, I have to say return 0. Now I am done with everything. I have to return 0. So I have result right there, and I also have result right over here. Let me change these name. So let's call this function print, and then I'm gonna change this right here, print. Yeah, just like that. So let's run this this code and see what happens. Okay, it's compiling. Oh, it looks like we got errors. So let's check these errors quickly. Let's see what we went wrong. Looks like I have a small syntax error inside this function right here. So right here, I should be having a comma, not a semicolon. Don't know why I did that mistake. Okay, let's see. Do I have another? Okay, looks like we're good now. So let's try and run that code and see what happens. Compiling. And that is the result matrix that we have. So let's check the numbers. So let's check our numbers just to confirm. So we have 3. So it looks like we add 2 and 1, and then we have 3, and then we add 3 and 3, and now we have 6. And for the second one, we add 1 and 2, we have 3, and then we add 2 and 3, and then we have 5. So our result is a 2 by 2 matrix. So you can play around with this. Like make it a 3 by 3 matrix if you want. So let's make it a 3 by 3 matrix and see what happens. So let's say we have 3 rows, and then we have 3 columns. So what if we change that? We have to change these values here as well. So we're going to have 3 here, and then we're going to have 3 there. I'm going to change this one to 3, and this one also to 3. So now that we have 3 rows, we're going to have to add a row here. So to add a row, you just go in there, and then we're going to have curly braces. You already have a row. So inside this row, we're going to have digits. So let's say our first digit in column 1 is 1. And then in column 2, our second digit in column 2, which is in column 2, let's say 1 again. And then we're going to have so since we have 3 columns, so we have 3 columns, 3 curly braces, and then we're gonna need 3, sorry, that should be rows. So 3 rows, we have 3 rows, and now we need to have 3 columns. So as you can see here, we have 2 columns, 2 columns, 2 columns in every row. So that will give us a syntax error, not, well, it's gonna give us an error. So we have to add a column in each row. So you're gonna add, let's say 1. I'm gonna add 1 again there. So I'm gonna say comma 1. So now I have 3 columns in each row. So I have 3 columns right here, 3 columns, 3 columns in each row. So I have to do the same thing on the second matrix. So I'm gonna add a row first. So I'm gonna add a row. I have the third row, and now I'm going to add columns. So I'm going to add 1 1 1. So I have 3 columns in this row, and I have to add another column in this second row. So I'm going to add 2, and then I'm going to add another column in this row. So just like that. Now since I have changed that to a 3 by 3 matrix, so the result will also be a 3 by 3 matrix. So I have to change this to a 3 by 3 matrix. So let's run this code and see what happens. So I'm gonna run this code, and there's the result. So the result is a 3 by 3 matrix. So to confirm this, you can see we add 2 and 1, we get 3, and then we add 3 and 3, we get 6, and then we add 1 and 2, we get 3. And then for the second row, we're gonna add 1 and 2, we get 3, and then 2 and 3, we get 5, 1 and 2, we get 3. And then for the last row, we add 1 and 1, we get 2, and then 1 and 1, 2, and 1 and 1, 2. And that's it. So now we're going to be doing matrix multiplication. So we're going to be multiplying 2 matrices, and then we're going to start off by making a function that multiplies 2 matrices together. So we're going to start off by writing void, and then we're going to give our function a name. So we're going to call it, and you can call it anything you want. I'll just call it matrix mul. And then inside this function, I'm going to have these arguments. So I'm going to have int, and then I'm going to have row, let's say row 1, and then I'm going to have int, and then I'm going to have calls 1, and then I'm going to have a matrix. So I'm going to have matrix int matrix 1. So I'm going to say matrix 1, and then I'm going to have 2 brackets. So the first square brackets, I'm going to have rows 1, and then for the second square brackets, I'm going to have calls 1, and then I'm going to have int rows 2. So this will be the dimensions of the matrix 2. So I'm going to have rows, so I should have int there. So int rows 2, so that should be 2, and then I'm going to have int calls 2, and now I'm going to have matrix 2. So I'm going to have int matrix 2, and then I'm going to have the first square brackets, which will have rows 2, and then the second square bracket will have colts 2. And now I'm going to have the result matrix. So for the result matrix, I'm going to have an int, and then I'm going to have results. 2 square brackets. The first one is rows. So I'm going to say rows 1, and then I'm going to say rows 2, calls 2, sorry, calls 2. And then when I'm done, I'm going to go outside and have my curly braces. So inside the curly braces, I'm going to loop through each row of matrix 1. So let me put a comment. I'm going to say loop through each row of matrix 1. So I'm going to do this using a for loop. So I'm going to use a for loop, and then I'm going to say int I is equal to 0, and then I'm going to say as long as I is less than rows 1, and then I'm going to say I plus plus, and then inside the for loop, I'm going to loop through each column of matrix 2. So let me put a comment. So I'm going to say loop through each call of matrix 2. So I'm going to do this using a for loop. So inside the for loop, I'm going to say int j is equal to 0, and then I'm going to say as long as j is less than calls 2, and then I'm going to increment j. So I'm going to have j plus plus. So inside this for loop, I'm going to multiply. So first of all, I'll have to initialize the matrix element to 0. So the result, so I'm going to say result of the matrix. So I'm going to say I, and then I'm going to have j, and then I'm going to initialize this to 0. And then I'm going to have a for loop after this. So let me see. Okay. So still inside this for loop, I'll have to multiply the row from matrix 1 by the column in matrix 2 and sum the product. So to do this, I'm simply going to stick inside this for loop, and then I'm going to say, let me write a comment first. So I'm going to say multiply the row from matrix 1 by the column. So let's say call from matrix 2 and sum the product. And then I'm going to do this using a for loop. So I'm going to have another for loop inside the second for loop. So inside this for loop, I'm going to have an int, and then I'm going to have, I can use any letter. So let's say k, and then k is equal to 0, and then I'm going to say as long as k is less than calls 1. So I'm going to have calls 1, and then I'm going to have my semicolon, and then I'm going to increment k. So I'm going to say k plus plus. So I'm going to have my curly braces, and then inside this for loop, I'm going to have the result. So I'm going to have say result, and then I J is equal to matrix. So I'm going to say matrix 1, and then I'm going to have two square brackets with I, and then I'm going to have J, and then I'm going to add. Sorry, I have to multiply this one. Multiply, and then I'm going to say matrix 2, and then I'm going to have two square brackets ING. Then I'm going to have my semicolon. So let me put a plus right here. And that's it for the function that multiplies two matrices. We are done with this function, and now we're going to do a function that will print the result matrix to the screen. So to do this, we are going to skip a line, and then we just going to say void, and then we're going to call this function, let's call it print, and then I'm going to have this function to take in the number of rows. So we're going to have number of rows, and then I'm going to have the number of calls, and then I'm going to have the matrix. So int matrix, and then I'm going to have rows, then I'm going to have calls, and then I'm going to have to loop through each row of the matrix. So just like before, I'm going to have a for loop, and then I'm going to say int, I'm going to say I is equal to 0, and then I'm going to say as long as I is less than the number of rows, I have to increment I, and then I'm going to have my curly braces, and now I have to loop through each column of the matrix, and then I'm going to use a for loop, and then I'm going to say int j is equal to 0. So I have to say equal to 0 there, and then I'm gonna say j is less than the number of calls, and then I'm going to increment j, so j plus plus, and then I'm going to print each element of the matrix. So to print each element of the matrix, I'll just say printf, and then I'm going to say let me put these lines right here, and then I'm going to have my percentage d, and then I'm going to have go outside, and then we're going to write the matrix. So we're going to say matrix, and then we're going to have I and j, then we're going to have our semicolon. So after that, after printing the row, we're going to print a \n. So we're going to say print f, and then we're going to have a \n so that we can move to the next line after printing the entire row. And then we're going to have that semicolon. So now we are done with a function that prints the matrix to the screen. And now we're going to go into the main function, and then we're going to say int main, and then inside the main function we are going to start off by defining them first. Let's define a 2x3 matrix. So we have, let's say, let me write a comment here, let's say 2 by 3 matrix. So I'm going to say int, let's say this one is matrix 1. So we're going to say this is matrix 1, and then we're going to say let's say we're going to have two curly braces, and then we're going to have two rows, and then we're going to have 3 columns, and then we're going to say this is equal to curly braces. We're going to have 2 rows, which means we're going to have 2 curly braces inside the large curly brace. And then we're going to have 3 columns. So we're going to have, let's say, we're going to have 1 for the first column, and then we're going to have a comma, and then we're going to have 2 for the second column, and then for the third column of row 1 we're going to have a 3, and then for this second row we're going to have let's say 4, let me say 4, and then I'm going to have 5, and then 6. And now we're going to multiply that by a, let's say, 3 by 2 matrix. So we have to multiply this by 3 by 2 matrix. So let's say 3 by 2 matrix, which will be matrix 2. So we're going to have an int, and then we're going to say matrix 2, and then we're going to have a 3, and then we're going to have a 2 right there, and then we're going to have our curly braces. So we're going to have 3 blue curly braces inside the red curly braces. So the blue curly braces will represent the number of rows. So I'm going to have 1, then I'm going to have a comma, then 2, then I'm going to have a comma, then 3. So that should be curly braces. So now I have 3 rows. Now I have to have 2 columns. So I'm going to have let's say 1, and then let's say 2, and then for the second row I'm going to say 2 and 1, and then for the third row I'm going to say 3 and 2, and now I can put my semicolon. So now I'm going to declare a result matrix. So a result matrix will be a 2 by 2 matrix. So I'm going to say int, let's call this result, and then I'm going to have a 2, and then I'm going to have a 2, and then I'm going to put my semicolon. So now I have to call the function that will multiply these 2 matrices together. So that function is called matrix mul. So I'm going to call that function. So I'm going to say matrix and then mul, and then I'm going to give it arguments. So the arguments, I'm going to say the dimensions of the first matrix of matrix 1 is 2, and then the second dimension, so we have these dimensions, we have 2, which is that value over here, and then we have 3, which is that value over there, and then I'm going to have a comma, and then I'm going to say matrix 1, and then I'm going to have the dimensions of the second matrix, which is 3. I'm going to write it here, 3, and then I'm going to say 2, and then I'm going to write matrix 2, matrix 2, and then I'm going to include the result matrix. So the result matrix, so I'm going to say result, and then when I'm done I just have to put my semicolon. So this is a function call. So this already multiplies the 2 matrices together, but we want to see the matrix, so we're just going to print the matrix to the screen. So to print the matrix to the screen, we're going to say print f, and then we're going to say the result after matrix multiplication, and then I'll just put a \n semicolon, and then I'm going to call the function that prints the matrix. So that function is called print. So I'm going to write here print, and then I'm going to have my parameters. So I'm going to say 2, and then I'm going to say 2, which are the dimensions of the result matrix. We're going to have 2 and 2, and then I'm going to call this result, and then I'm going to have my semicolon. So after this, now we are done. We're going to have a return 0, and that's it. So let's run this code and see what happens. So it's compiling. Oh, we still got errors. So let's see where we went wrong here. Okay. Looks like I have a syntax right there. Yep. So I have rows 1 here and I have row 1 there. So I have to change these two rows. Let me put that there. Okay. So let's try run this again. Let's see what happens. It's compiling. And there we have it. So we have the result. So we had a let's see, we had a 2 by 3 matrix. Multiply that by a 3 by 2 matrix, of which the result will be a 2 by 2 matrix. And as you can see, we have a 2 by 2 matrix right here. Yeah, and there we have it. So you can try and play around with the numbers and see what you get.